Welcome to the Stagecoach Inn. Hi, my name is Alan, founder of Juan G. Paranormal Investigations. The Stagecoach Inn was built in 1856 by John and Martha Moorhead. The reason the Moorheads built this location was because they thought it was their duty to help travelers as they crossed the state of Iowa, to give them a place to rest and recuperate after sometimes a long and perilous journey. Now, sometimes that journey would encounter Sioux war parties, so naturally they needed some place where it was safe. Now, I might mention during this little documentary that being a paranormal investigator, I couldn't not take the opportunity to do a little bit of paranormal investigating at the same time that I do this documentary. So I've placed around this wonderful location a couple different cameras. One is set on the staircase. Now, it's looking at a millimeter. We've had activity on the staircase in the past setting off a vibration sensor. So we're hoping that we can capture some kind of activity with the numbers rising and falling on the millimeter. The second location is in the cubby upstairs. We'll get to that pretty soon. But the cubby was a place where the children would hide when Indians were near. So I placed a full spectrum camera inside there, along with a proximity device. Now, this device will detect some kind of a static charge thought to be emanated by some of these spirits. It's also thought that this cubby is where children hide. So we've also placed a teddy bear in there in hopes that maybe a child will approach the teddy bear and activate the device. Anyway, this little room that we're in was primarily the size of the original log cabin. Now, a lot of the cabin, the logs were stripped down and ripped into planks later in time to create what you're seeing now. But the cabin was primarily this size. And when travelers would come here, there wasn't a lot of room to sleep, so they took all the furniture out of this room, placed it outside, and the travelers would lay on the floor, along with chickens, ducks, and possibly pigs, simply because the Sioux were so prevalent in this area that they were afraid if they were left outside that they'd be stolen. So let's go to the next portion of the house. This would be the kitchen portion of the inn. This is where Martha Moorhead would serve meals. In fact, here behind me is the original table that was found in the barn just below the inn. A lot of meals were served here from all the travelers that came from all over the country. But there was something else that this table served as. You see, this room was also the first hospital in Ida Grove. So, on occasion, this table was used for amputations. It's a fact. It is written. It's documented. Amputations occurred on this table. What would happen is they would hold the participant, whether it be willing or not, down on the table and snip off fingers and toes. I can't even imagine the brutality of that act. We've also caught activity in this room, although not as much as the rest of the house. As you will soon see more of this house, you will also find that there's a small area that the activity is most prevalent in. So let's move on. This is the men's room. This is where the men would gather. This is where the ammunition was held, just in case of Indian attack. Now, Moorhead, or John Moorhead, was very proud of his firearm collection. In fact, when Indians were about, he would invite them in to show them what kind of an arsenal that he had, in hopes that they would just stay away. Now, this is also a room where a lot of activities occurred, right here at this table. Before I moved to the millimeter, I used the K2 on a lot of occasions. And I would set the millimeter here on this table, or excuse me, the K2. And I would ask questions of a gentleman that committed suicide on this property. This gentleman's name was John Moore. Why he committed suicide, nobody really knows. It was either had to do with some kind of legal problem, illness. Anyway, he went to the high ridge just a little northwest of the inn, found a large elm tree, and he hung himself. I've often wondered if John's spirit or being, whatever's left behind, still remains here and toils over that moment before he rode his horse to the top of that high ridge. I asked some questions directly to John Moore. I told him that there was no marker, there was no headstone at the cemetery. And if that seemed to trouble him, the K2 gave me a direct response. This is a little bit of that video that I captured that day. Look up your burial plot. According to the book, you're there, but I couldn't find a stone. Did they not bury you with a stone? That must be upsetting to know that you have no name. It is upsetting. Is that upsetting to you that you have no name? Now, as I've mentioned, there's been a lot of activity captured here at the Stagecoach Inn. And a lot of that activity started right here in this room. It's known as a community room, but it also served as a church. Now, when I first started investigating the Stagecoach Inn, I was here 3 times. The first 2 occasions, I can quite honestly say there was nothing that happened. But it wasn't until the 3rd investigation, and quite honestly, I was going to give up if I didn't capture anything. Did something happen? As I was standing about here, when something tugged on the back of my coat. What followed was an EVP that I was unaware of until I reviewed all the evidence that happened that night. Now, I apologize for the audio on this clip, but this is back in a time when my equipment wasn't quite up to the task, so to speak, so there are some subtitles. But this is that clip. This is how it all started here at the Stagecoach Inn. It's really cold in here. It's cold outside. It's cold outside. All of a sudden it's got extremely cold right here in this spot. Is there somebody here that would like to say something to me? Don't be afraid. You can be frank. You can walk right up to me and shake my hand. The house is essentially flat.
There's somebody just tug on my back, right here. That was a tug. Honest goodness, that was a tug. Is there somebody here in this room with me? That was a tug. Honest goodness, that was a tug. Is there somebody in here in this room with me?
This next area of the inn is known as Judge Moorhead's quarters. Now, the judge wasn't a judge that you might think. He didn't serve over any kind of criminal hearings or trials. He was primarily a land judge. He would let people know who owned what property. Now, the judge would often go to this window and make his rulings. He didn't want the farmers to come in with their muddy boots and upset Martha. Well, at least we thought it was this window. Through further research, I discovered that over in this corner used to be a door. So it could be that they stood at the door and not the window. But what makes all this interesting is a paranormal team by the name of Siouxland Paranormal Research Society came to the inn, and they put a beam sensor across this window. Now take in mind, this beam sensor had never activated. They bought this beam sensor for Edinburgh Manor, and they were certain that in Edinburgh that device would trigger, and it never did. It only triggered here, in this room, where Judge Moorhead would reside. This is that video.
You make this move?
Something just broke the alarm in here by the window.
That should not have gone off. It's right by the window where she got that. That's his window, she said. That's where we put the sound. That should not have gone off. Those don't go off like that.
Somebody over here by the window?
Has to be. Now, what kind of a sensor is that exactly?
It's a beam sensor.
So something has to actually cross them.
Something has to break that beam in order for it to do that. In all honesty, we've used it at Edinburgh Manor, and that never went off. And that place would have been the one place where we've investigated where we thought for sure that thing would have been tripped, and it didn't. And this is the first time I've seen that thing getting tripped. So someone would have to break that beam to set that off. And considering what Amy said earlier, like I said, she heard a voice say that that's my window.
Well, that makes sense because
And that was earlier.
that's where Judge Moorhead would reside over his cases, was at the window. Not only did the inn serve as a hospital and a courthouse, but it was also a school. This is where the children of the county of Ida would come and learn their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. This is also another room where activity's been captured in. Not long back, I was filming for my Facebook page, and I had entered this room and I looked up to the little placard on the wall that showed that this was the school in Ida County. But as I began to pan across the room, I captured something. Now, I'm not real sure what it is, but to me it looks as if it's some kind of manifesting apparition. This brings me to another gentleman that we're going to refer to as Mr. X, who back in the late to early 60s, him and some friends slept here overnight. Now, it was nothing like what you see now. It was pretty much tore apart. But they'd thrown their sleeping bags down here on the floor, and later that evening, Mr. X woke up in what he described as two red eyes that were similar to two pen lights looking directly at him. And to him to float. And as he shined his flashlight, as he told me, in the direction of these two lights, there was nothing above or below these lights.
Roll over and I noticed two red lights, and they were kind of bright. They were almost like a pencil flashlight, more or less. And they were just solid red. And I just thought it was one of my friends trying to spook me, because I do spookies. They were both sleeping in the sleeping bag, so I woke them both up. They had noticed the very same thing. We just figured somebody from the school heard we were coming out here, so they were going to come out and to rattle us the most they could. So all three of us picked up our flashlights. We shone it directly at the lights or the eyes. It was about the same distance as a human being's eyes. We shone, and as far as I can remember, and it's as truthful as I can remember, there was no substance, no figure, no nothing, just solid open space above and below the eyes or the lights. They kept coming forward, and we didn't stick around any longer than that. It just sent chills up and down my spine.
So anyway, this is a very short clip. In fact, I've slowed it down so you can maybe make out whatever it was that I captured here in the classroom area. So now we're on the staircase that leads upstairs. This staircase leads to the cubby hole that I referred to earlier, where children would hide in. But there's something else special about this staircase. If any of you have ever seen any of my videos, you'll primarily see a lot of activity with a vibration sensor on these steps. That brings me to another investigating team, Paranormal Distractions. Now, they came here with absolutely no idea of what they would find. In fact, they went out of their way not to look at any of my posts. They decided to put a motion sensor here on these steps and point it towards this wall. So the only way that it would activate was if something went past it. They were sitting in the community room, and I was videotaping a flashlight session, which was basically a flashlight that would turn on if an entity was there and be turned off by this same entity or whatever was present. While they were doing this, that's when they noticed the motion sensor had lit up. This is that segment. You'll also see a short clip of Dan, my lead investigator, as he's in his bedroom at the top of the steps, doing some EVP work when this vibration sensor off. In fact, we'll lead up to that event with an event with me and my team in the classroom area as the vibration sensor went off and caught it on video. So anyway, here are these two events.
I keep hearing the name Ann or Anna, and he said that was the name of one of the what?
Hey, motion sensor.
I know. That just went off.
That's on the staircase. I get
Yeah.
a lot of activity in there.
Yep. You said Ann or Anna was from who? What, don't
She
go any
was
further.
she was the child of John and Martha Moorhead.
Ciao, John and Martha Moorhead.
I've got her voice over the spirit box on many occasions. We'd ask if it was Anna, and she'd come out and said yes.
Oh, well, because I keep hearing the name. I won't go any further because she's not going to be... She kind of wants her 5 foot at least of space. But we're not here to make you afraid or anything. We're here to simply communicate with you and tell a little bit of the history of this beautiful place called the Stagecoach Inn that you once lived in or was part of.
Turning on the vibration sensor right now. All right. Okay, we got your sensor turned on. It's on the steps. If you want to make that go off, you can. You know how to play with it. Also, we have this device sitting here in the chair. Now, it has 2 red lights on it. If you approach that, if you come near to it, those lights will go out. And that's one way that we know that, holy shit. That's behind the end of the gear. Okay, I don't know, glad you like that. You must like that vibration sound, sir.
This is Dan a short time later. You'll see him down in the lower left-hand corner on camera 3 position. Now if you notice, he just walked up the steps and he walked past the vibration sensor. Now Dan weighs about 213 pounds, and it's really hard for him to walk lightly up these wooden staircases. But yet the vibration sensor did not go off. But watch what happens as Dan sits there and begins to question and ask about the Civil War. So again, you decide.
Actually, the Civil War era, that just what was like life back then. It's a lot different than what it is today. Well, thank you for setting the vibration sensor off for me.
This is it. This is one of the places that Paranormal Endeavors investigated. But before I talk about that, I'll tell you a little bit about this cubbyhole. You see, when Indians were near or close by the inn, they would take the children and put them in here. And then they would take a cabinet, dresser, and place it in front of this hole in hopes that the Indians wouldn't notice it if they entered the home, and the children would be spared. Now with that said, as Eric was sitting here, about how I am right now, he had a K2 meter sitting here on this ledge. And he began asking questions. And he asked questions as if he was talking to a child. The K2 meter seemed to respond. This is that video clip. Was there a child present? I don't know. You tell me.
I hope I didn't scare you. Are you still here? You can come back. Okay. I'm just trying to establish here as we're trying to figure out who's who here. Do you go in there because of punishment, do you have to go? Yes?
On a much later investigation that involved paranormal endeavors, we were in this very room where the cubby hole is present. We had a combined effort between Waniji and Eric's team. And as we were standing here, discussing some things that were going on, we were hearing sounds all around the upstairs here, as if something was pulling us from one room to another. And as we were discussing this, what sounded like a whistle occurred. And it came from this staircase directly behind me. We were all convinced that it wasn't. In fact, I had a computer going at the time that would monitor audio. And we listened to it, and it did. It sounded like a... But I had a camera, a static camera, placed downstairs, pointing up the staircase, and it had audio on it. It too captured that sound. But I gotta tell you, it wasn't a whistle. It was a scream. I don't know what that was, but whatever it was, put a chill up my spine. This is that clip. So yeah, that could be very well the case, you know, like you said, using that word luring. And
Not our
it
business,
lured
is
us
basically what it
away
said.
from whatever was maybe going to be revealed at some point. And it just distracted us away from what we were doing.
Yeah.
Because it was subtle.
Did you hear that?
I heard that whistle.
Yeah, whistle.
Nice. Was that you?
I got that on Audacity. I know I did.
I hope so.
That's exactly what we heard.
Yeah. You're gonna
That-
sure to save that.
I'm going to continue on, and you're going to hear the rest of the conversation. We all hear it as it happens.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Because I was worried it wasn't going to sound like how we heard it, because that
That's
happens.
exactly how it is. This next room that we're about to visit was known as the stagecoach driver's room. They would sleep in this bed. They were basically segregated from the rest of the population. In fact, there was at one time a wall that went directly across this open space. Now one might ask, well, how did they get in and out? Well, that little door, there was a ladder outside that they would climb down. And they would get up early in the morning to harness the team to get ready for that day's ride. This was also a room where I've caught a lot of activity, mostly EVPs. This is also near the area where Dan, one of my lead investigators, was simply walking around with a video camera. What he captured on the audio was chilling. Child. And it sounds like that child is stating, "Someone save us." So you listen, and you tell me, was this a child? And does he want someone to save him? And if that's the case, from what? This final room that we're going to look at is the judge's and Martha's bedroom. The reason we believe they picked this particular room as their bedroom was because just outside this window is the barn. The judge had rigged up a bell with a long string or rope to it that came into this room. So at night, if somebody would open the barn doors, Indians, he would know about it. I guess you could call it our very first security system. But this is also the room that the judge passed away in. One visiting team, which unfortunately I have not got their evidence, recorded an EVP over a spirit box. And when asked the question, who was in this room, it says John. So is John Moorhead still here? I don't know. I don't know who's here exactly, or what. As you've seen, as we've walked through this location, there are a lot of items here, most of which have been donated by various people. And it's not to say that any one of those items could have some kind of spiritual attachment. So we may not be dealing with just one or two entities, but several. So, is there intelligence here? I think so. Is there residuals here? Absolutely. You know, in my time of investigating the Stagecoach Inn, there are still members of the Historical Society, older members, that refuse to admit that there is some kind of activity here at the Stagecoach Inn. But all the evidence that I have presented to you, I believe, proves otherwise. So, before we leave today, I'm going to leave you with a montage of evidence that's been captured here at the Stagecoach Inn. So until the next time when Wanajee can investigate the Stagecoach, we'll just let that place rest and do whatever it is it does. Thanks. Instead of leaving you with that montage of evidence, I thought you might like to see this. Remember that full spectrum camera in that cubbyhole area? Well, sometime during this documentary, something remarkable happens. The teddy bear gets touched. So see for yourself, and you tell me if this is paranormal. Anyway, take a look.